July 7th, 1968. 6:47 a.m. Two men wake up on opposite sides of the Hudson River. In Harlem, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sits at the counter of Wells Restaurant, third stool from the register, watching steam rise from black coffee he hasn't touched yet. He's 62 years old, wearing an $800 suit that hangs looser than it did 6 months ago. The coffee is too hot. He waits. In Teaneck, New Jersey, Frank Lucas wakes up in a mansion he bought with cash 6 months earlier. 8,000 square feet, swimming pool, tennis court. He's 38 years old and controls the largest heroin operation in American history. His bedroom is bigger than most Harlem apartments. At 6:53 a.m., Bumpy Johnson's hand begins to shake. Coffee spills across the counter. He tries to stand. His legs won't cooperate. He collapses onto black and white checkered tiles with a sound that makes 40 people stop breathing. At 7:04 a.m., paramedic Thomas Wright pronounces Bumpy Johnson dead at the scene. Massive heart attack, natural causes. At 7:30 a.m., Frank Lucas receives the phone call. "Boss, Bumpy's dead." Frank sits down on his $8,000 Italian leather sofa, pours himself Pappy Van Winkle bourbon at 7:30 in the morning because this news deserves bourbon. The old man is dead, which means Frank Lucas just became the most powerful criminal in Harlem with no one left to challenge him. He smiles, drinks, pours another. Frank Lucas has no idea that 3 days ago, while he was buying his third Mercedes, a manila envelope was placed in a safe deposit box at Carver Federal Savings Bank. Inside that envelope, 417 pages documenting every shipment Frank has made since 1966, every corrupt cop on his payroll, every bank account in the Cayman Islands, every wholesale price, every street corner, every dollar. Everything the federal government needs to destroy him, with instructions to deliver the evidence exactly 7 days after Ellsworth Johnson's death. Dead men tell no tales, unless telling tales was the whole point. But Frank doesn't know this yet. Right now, at 7:35 a.m., Frank Lucas is celebrating. He has 7 years, 1 month, and 21 days before he understands what just happened. 18 months earlier, January 1967, the meeting happens in Bumpy Johnson's apartment at 409 Edgecombe Avenue on a Tuesday afternoon when the temperature outside is 19 degrees and snow is falling on Harlem like ash. 3 men sit across from Bumpy at his dining room table. 2 are Corsican, representing the French Connection Syndicate in Marseille. 1 is American, acting as translator and intermediary. They've brought samples. Pure heroin, white powder in small glassine envelopes, labeled with a blue stamp that will soon become famous throughout the East Coast as Blue Magic. The lead Corsican, Pierre Renard, 52 years old, scar across his left cheek from a knife fight in Algiers, explains the proposal through the translator. Direct supply from French laboratories, no Italian middlemen, no markup from the mafia families. You buy from us at $4,000 per kilo. You sell at $50,000 per kilo on American streets. Conservative estimate, $50 million first year, $100 million by year 3. Bumpy listens, asks questions about purity, about supply chain reliability, about whether the Corsicans have clearance from the Italian families to operate in New York without triggering a war. The Corsicans have done their homework. Yes, they've negotiated with the Italians. Yes, the supply chain is secure. Yes, the product is pharmaceutical grade, purer than anything currently on American streets. They slide a contract across the table. Partnership terms, revenue splits, territory boundaries. Everything formalized like this is a legitimate business deal rather than a conspiracy to flood Harlem with heroin. Bumpy reads the entire contract, all 17 pages, takes his time. The Corsicans wait. The translator shifts in his chair. The apartment is silent except for pages turning and the radiator hissing. Finally, Bumpy sets down the contract, folds his hands, looks directly at Pierre Renard. No, the translator blinks. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson said. I said no. Take your product and leave my city. Pierre Renard's face hardens. Mr. Johnson, perhaps you don't understand the opportunity. I understand perfectly. You want to turn Harlem into the same wasteland heroin created in Marseille and Shanghai and every other place this poison touches. You want to make $100 million while teenage boys rob their own mothers for another fix. The answer is no. We can offer better terms, higher percentage. The meeting is over. The Corsicans leave. Professional, polite, no threats, no arguments, just businessmen accepting a declined proposal. But someone else was in the room during that meeting. Frank Lucas, standing near the door, watching his mentor turn down $50 million because of principles. Frank doesn't say anything. Not then. But 3 weeks later, when the Corsicans contact him directly with the same offer, Frank says yes. When Bumpy finds out, and he finds out within 48 hours because Bumpy Johnson knows everything that happens in Harlem, he calls Frank to meet him at Small's Paradise. It's 11 p.m. on a Thursday. The club is packed, but Bumpy has a booth in the back that's always kept empty for him. Frank arrives 20 minutes late, which is deliberate disrespect, but Bumpy doesn't react. You took the French deal, Bumpy says. I took a business opportunity you were too scared to take, Frank says. Scared? Yeah, scared. Scared of change, scared of real money. You've been running the same tired numbers racket for 30 years while the world moves on. I'm building an empire. Bumpy is quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice is soft, conversational, the tone that people who know him recognize as dangerous. You know what Stephanie St. Clair taught me in 1932? She taught me that organized crime works when you give people hope. Numbers, gambling, even loan sharking. Those are choices. People choose to play. They can stop any time. But heroin doesn't give people choices, Frank. Heroin takes everything, turns human beings into zombies who'll kill their own families for another hit. That's not my problem. I'm just meeting market demand. And when Harlem is full of addicts, when every corner has junkies and every family has someone who overdosed, when the community you grew up in looks like a war zone, that's going to be your legacy. Frank leans back, smiles. My legacy is going to be that I was smart enough to see opportunity when it came. Your legacy is going to be that you were too old and too scared to stay relevant. Bumpy could have Frank killed. One phone call. Frank knows this. Everyone in Small's Paradise knows this. But Bumpy doesn't make that call. Instead, he stands up, leaves money on the table for his untouched drink, looks down at Frank Lucas. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. You won't understand that for a while, but you will. Then Bumpy walks out of Small's Paradise for the last time. 3 weeks later, blue magic appears on Harlem streets, stronger than anything currently available. Purer, more addictive, packaged in blue glassine envelopes that become instantly recognizable. Within 6 months, Frank Lucas is generating $5 million monthly. Within a year, $10 million monthly. By July 1968, Frank Lucas controls the largest heroin distribution network in the United States, operating in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and expanding south. And Bumpy Johnson, the man who refused the deal, is dying of heart disease that his doctor says gives him 6 to 12 months without intervention. But Bumpy Johnson isn't planning to intervene. He's planning something else entirely. June 1967. Dr. Samuel Green's office is in a brownstone on 135th Street, 3 blocks from Bumpy's apartment. Bumpy has been coming here since 1958. Regular checkups, minor ailments, the kind of routine medical care that most Harlem residents can't afford, but Bumpy pays for in cash. This visit isn't routine. Bumpy has been experiencing chest pain for 3 months. Persistent, getting worse. The kind of pain that makes you stop mid-sentence and wait for it to pass. Dr. Green runs tests, EKG, blood work, chest X-ray. When the results come back, he sits Bumpy down with the expression doctors develop when they have to deliver bad news to patients they've known for years. Your heart is failing, Ellsworth. Severe coronary artery disease, multiple blockages. Based on these tests, you've probably had at least 1 minor heart attack already without knowing it. How long? With medication and lifestyle changes, maybe 12 months. Maybe longer if you're lucky. But realistically, you're looking at 6 months. And without medication? Dr. Green pauses. Without medication? 3 months, maybe less. Why would you? Just curious. What medications? Dr. Green writes 3 prescriptions. Nitroglycerin for chest pain, digitalis to strengthen heart contractions, anticoagulants to prevent clots. He explains dosage, side effects, the importance of compliance. You need to take these every day, Ellsworth. No exceptions. Your heart can't sustain much more damage. Bumpy takes the prescriptions. Thanks, Dr. Green. Fills them at the pharmacy on 134th Street that same day. For exactly 2 weeks, Bumpy Johnson takes his medication as prescribed. Every pill, correct dosage, perfect compliance. Then he stops. Doesn't tell Dr. Green. Doesn't tell Mamie, his wife of 41 years. Just stops taking the pills that are keeping him alive. Because Bumpy Johnson has done the mathematics and realized something important. A living informant can be intimidated, bribed, discredited, or killed. But a dead informant can't be touched. And if Bumpy is going to destroy Frank Lucas, he needs to become untouchable. June 1967. June 1968. What Bumpy Johnson does over his final 13 months can only be reconstructed from evidence that surfaces 7 years later during Frank Lucas's federal trial. He starts by activating relationships built over 40 years, people who owe him favors, people whose children he sent to college, people whose families he helped during hard times, people who remember when Bumpy kept Dutch Schultz out of Harlem in 1935 and made it possible for black operators to control their own neighborhoods. He doesn't ask these people to testify, doesn't ask them to wear wires or go undercover, just asks them to observe and report, to document what they see in Frank Lucas's organization. A supplier who works for Frank but remembers when Bumpy gave him his first job in 1952. He provides shipping manifests, dates, weights, costs, every shipment from Bangkok through Marseille to New York. a distributor who manages Frank's Newark operation, but whose mother Bumpy paid to send through nursing school. She provides street-level documentation, which corners, which dealers, which cops are paid to look the other way. A bookkeeper who handles Frank's finances, but whose son Bumpy kept out of prison in 1964 with an expensive lawyer. He provides bank account numbers, Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Panama, the entire money laundering network mapped with precision. None of these people know they're part of a larger operation. Each thinks they're the only source. Each believes they're just helping an old man who helped them once. Each has no idea their information is being compiled into something that will destroy Frank Lucas 7 years after Bumpy dies. By December 1967, Bumpy has 417 pages of documentation. Every shipment, every transaction, every corrupt cop with badge number and precinct, every bank account with routing numbers and balances, every wholesale price, every street price, every profit margin calculated with accounting precision. It's the most comprehensive documentation of a heroin operation that anyone has ever compiled. Better than anything the DEA has ever produced because it comes from inside the organization, from people who know exactly how the system works. Then Bumpy makes contact with federal authorities. The meeting happens in December 1967 at a location that remains classified even in declassified documents. Present are Bumpy Johnson, 2 agents from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, and 1 federal prosecutor from the Southern District of New York. Bumpy brings his 417 pages, slides them across the table. This is everything you need to destroy Frank Lucas's heroin operation. Shipments, money, distribution, protection, all documented, all verified, all ready for prosecution. The prosecutor, whose name is redacted in all documents but who later becomes a federal judge, looks through the pages, realizes immediately what he's seeing. This isn't street-level intelligence. This is the entire architecture of a criminal empire handed over on a silver platter. "Why are you doing this?" the prosecutor asks. "Because Frank Lucas is poisoning my community. Because heroin destroys everything it touches. Because I spent 40 years building Harlem into a place where black people could control their own economic destiny. And Frank is burning it down for profit. You understand this makes you an informant. If this gets out, it won't get out, because you're not going to use this evidence until I'm dead." Silence. The 2 federal agents look at each other. The prosecutor sets down the pages. "Explain." "I'm dying. Heart disease. 6 months at most. When I die, you wait exactly 1 week. Then you start building your case. Take your time. Do it right. Don't rush. Build something so airtight that Frank can't wiggle out. 7 years if you need it. I'm not going anywhere." Why wait until you're dead? Because dead men can't be cross-examined. Dead men can't be threatened. Dead men can't be called to testify and have defense attorneys destroy their credibility. I'm handing you the case of your career, and all you have to do is wait for me to die and then use this evidence to bury Frank Lucas. The prosecutor considers this. It's unorthodox, possibly unprecedented. But the evidence is extraordinary, and the logic is sound. We'll need to verify everything independently. We can't just rely on anonymous documentation. That's why I'm giving you 7 years. Use this as a roadmap. Send your own agents. Build your own case. But use my information as the foundation. When you're ready to move, you'll have everything you need. The meeting ends with a handshake. No written agreement, no official record. Just an understanding between men who recognize opportunity when they see it. Bumpy Johnson walks out of that meeting knowing he's just signed his own death warrant. But he's also guaranteed that Frank Lucas will pay for betraying everything Bumpy built. 6 months later, on July 7th, 1968 at Wells Restaurant, Bumpy Johnson's heart finally gives out. The evidence is delivered to federal authorities 1 week later, exactly as promised. And 7 years of patient investigation begins. 1968, 1974. Frank Lucas doesn't waste time mourning Bumpy Johnson. The funeral is Tuesday, July 9th. Frank attends, pays respects, makes appropriate statements about losing a mentor. By Wednesday, he's already expanding operations into territories Bumpy controlled. Without Bumpy's opposition, Frank's empire explodes. Blue Magic becomes the dominant heroin brand throughout the East Coast. The purity is higher than anything else on the streets, which means addicts seek it specifically, which means Frank can charge premium prices while undercutting competitors on volume. The mathematics are staggering. Frank buys heroin from his Corsican suppliers at $4,000 per kilo. He cuts it minimally, his product is famous for purity, and sells it wholesale at $40,000 per kilo. Street dealers sell it retail for $50,000 per kilo. Frank is moving 50 kilos monthly by late 1968, 100 kilos monthly by 1970, 200 kilos monthly by 1972. The profit margins make him obscenely wealthy. He buys the Teaneck mansion, buys a fleet of luxury cars, buys his mother a house in North Carolina, buys properties in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, invests in legitimate businesses as fronts, car washes, dry cleaners, nightclubs. But Frank's biggest mistake, the error that will eventually destroy him, is that he can't resist displaying his wealth. February 1972, Muhammad Ali versus Floyd Patterson at Madison Square Garden. Frank Lucas attends wearing a full-length chinchilla coat with matching hat. The coat costs $100,000. Frank sits ringside, the most visible person in the arena. Photographers capture him in the coat. The images run in newspapers. A federal agent named Richard Roberts sees one of those photographs in the New York Times. Roberts has been investigating heroin trafficking for 6 years. He's heard about Blue Magic. He's heard about Frank Lucas. But he hasn't been able to build a case because Frank is careful, operates through intermediaries, keeps himself distant from street-level distribution. But the chinchilla coat photograph changes everything. Roberts stares at it and thinks, nobody makes $100,000 coat money from legitimate businesses. Frank Lucas just announced himself as a target worth investigating. Roberts doesn't know it yet, but his investigation is about to intersect with 417 pages of documentation that have been sitting in a locked file cabinet since July 1968, waiting for the right moment. That moment arrives in January 1975. January 28, 1975, 6:12 a.m. 150 federal agents execute coordinated raids across 5 states simultaneously. New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Nevada. Every property Frank Lucas owns, every associate's residence, every business that serves as a front. Everything happens at once. At Frank's Teaneck mansion, agents surround the property at 6 a.m. 12 cars, 30 agents, search warrants, arrest warrants, body armor. At exactly 6:12 a.m., they break down the front door. Frank Lucas is still in his bathrobe, eating breakfast, watching morning television. He sees agents flooding into his house and knows immediately that this is over. No point running, nowhere to run. He puts his hands up, doesn't resist. They find $250,000 cash hidden in the attic. They find documents in his home office, shipping records, bank statements, contact information for suppliers. They find everything the anonymous informant E.J. promised they would find, plus 7 years of additional evidence federal agents accumulated during patient investigation. Frank is arrested at 6:17 a.m., handcuffed, read his rights, taken to federal holding in Newark. By noon, 47 of Frank's associates are in custody. The entire operation dismantled in one coordinated strike. The interrogation happens that afternoon. Frank sits in a gray room at the federal building in Newark, hands cuffed to the table, facing Special Agent Richard Roberts and an assistant U.S. attorney, whose name Frank doesn't catch. Roberts slides a folder across the table, opens it. Inside are documents Frank recognizes: shipping manifests, bank records, photographs of meetings Frank thought were private. "We've been watching you for 7 years," Roberts says. "We know everything, every shipment, every transaction, every cop you paid off. We have 47 people in custody. Most of them are already talking. Your organization is finished." Frank says nothing. Lawyers have taught him to stay silent until his attorney arrives. Roberts pulls out one more document, a single page, slides it across the table. "This is what I want you to see." Frank reads, source: anonymous informant E.J. documentation provided, June 1968. Informant status: deceased, July 7, 1968. Note: informant cannot be cross-examined or called to testify. Evidence verified through independent investigation, 1968, 1975. Frank stares at the page. June 1968. 1 month before Bumpy died. E.J. Ellsworth Johnson. And in that moment, sitting in that federal interrogation room, Frank Lucas understands what took him 7 years to figure out. Bumpy didn't just die. Bumpy spent his final months building this case, gathering evidence, documenting everything. Then he made a deal with federal authorities. "Wait until I'm dead, then use this information to destroy Frank Lucas. Dead men can't be threatened. Dead men can't be intimidated. Dead men can't be cross-examined in court. Dead men make perfect witnesses." And Bumpy Johnson transformed his own death into the ultimate weapon. Frank Lucas starts laughing. Not happy laughter. The laughter of someone who realizes they've been outplayed so completely that there's nothing left to do but acknowledge the brilliance of it. Roberts doesn't respond, just watches Frank laugh until the laughter turns into something else. 1976. Frank Lucas is convicted on federal drug trafficking charges in March 1976. The trial lasts 6 weeks. The prosecution presents 410 pages of documentation from anonymous informant E.J., plus 7 years of corroborating evidence federal agents collected. The defense tries everything. Challenges the admissibility of evidence from a deceased informant. Argues the documentation is unreliable hearsay. Attacks the credibility of cooperating witnesses. None of it works. The evidence is overwhelming. The case is airtight. Frank is sentenced to 70 years in federal prison. In 1977, facing the reality of dying in prison, Frank begins cooperating with prosecutors. He provides testimony against corrupt police officers, organized crime figures, other drug traffickers. His cooperation leads to 120 additional convictions. In exchange for cooperation, Frank's sentence is reduced to 40 years, then later to 15. He's released in 1981, arrested again in 1984 for attempting to re-establish drug operations, released again in 1991. He spends his final years giving interviews, watching himself portrayed by Denzel Washington in the 2007 film American Gangster, which makes him into a folk hero and dramatically exaggerates his importance while downplaying the role of the evidence that actually brought him down. Frank Lucas dies on May 30th, 2019, at age 88. But even in death, even after 51 years, Frank never learns for certain whether Bumpy Johnson deliberately stopped taking his heart medication to trigger a fatal cardiac event at a strategically chosen moment. Because the only person who knew the answer died on July 7, 1968 at Wells Restaurant. And dead men keep their secrets. December 2009. Mamie Johnson dies at age 94 in her Harlem apartment, 61 years after marrying Bumpy, 41 years after watching him collapse at Wells Restaurant. Among her possessions, a safe deposit box key for Carver Federal Savings Bank. The box contains jewelry, personal papers, photographs, and one sealed manila envelope. Written on the envelope in Mamie's handwriting, not to be opened until July 7, 2068, 100 years after Ellsworth's death. By then, everyone involved will be gone, and the truth can be told without consequences. The envelope is transferred to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, where it sits in climate-controlled storage, waiting. Nobody knows what it contains. Mamie never told anyone. The envelope remains sealed. But historians and researchers have theories. Some believe it contains Bumpy's medical records from 1967, 1968, showing whether he actually stopped taking his medication deliberately or simply became negligent about his health. Some believe it contains a letter Bumpy wrote to Mamie before he died, explaining his final strategy. Some believe it contains nothing at all, that the sealed envelope is itself the message, a final reminder that some secrets die with the people who hold them. The truth will be revealed on July 7, 2068, 42 years from now. Long after everyone who knew Bumpy Johnson is dead, long after Frank Lucas is forgotten, long after the streets of Harlem have been transformed by gentrification into something neither man would recognize. But until then, the question remains unanswered. Did Bumpy Johnson deliberately kill himself at exactly the right moment to become the perfect witness? Or did he simply die of natural causes and get lucky with timing? Was it the greatest strategic move in organized crime history? Or was it just coincidence elevated to legend by people who want to believe one man could be that calculating, that patient, that willing to sacrifice himself for revenge? The envelope knows. The envelope waits. And in 42 years, when someone finally breaks the seal and reads whatever Bumpy Johnson left behind, we'll know whether the legend is true. But Bumpy Johnson, who spent his entire life understanding that the most powerful move is the one your opponent never sees coming, probably wouldn't have it any other way. Because whether he deliberately stopped his medication or simply died of natural causes, the result was the same. Frank Lucas destroyed. The French Connection network dismantled. Harlem protected from the worst excesses of the heroin epidemic. And a message sent to every criminal who came after. Don't ever underestimate an old man who's played the long game for 40 years. because the longest game always wins, especially when you're willing to bet your own life on the final move. Wells' restaurant is gone now, replaced by a community center offering job training and GED programs. A plaque on the wall mentions that Bumpy Johnson died on this site in 1968, but provides no details. No mention of the 417 pages. No mention of anonymous informant EJ. No mention of the longest revenge in organized crime history. Just a simple memorial to a complicated man who defied easy categorization, and a sealed envelope waiting 42 more years to tell the rest of the story. If the story is even in there at all. Because maybe the greatest trick Bumpy Johnson ever pulled was making people think there was a trick, when really he just died. Or maybe it wasn't a trick at all. Maybe it was chess, and dead men make the best chess players, because nobody sees their next move coming, not even death itself. I really want to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. This story has reached readers on every continent, and I'm always amazed by how far these legends travel. Drop a comment, share this story, let's talk about it. If this story of the bloodiest wedding in Harlem history hit different, drop a like and subscribe. See you in the next one.